The companies winning with AI aren't the ones with the biggest budgets. They're the ones who are starting right now. If you've been waiting for someone to cut through the noise and show you exactly how AI can transform your work, your wait is over. Your competitors have already signed up. I'm Kenny, founder of Brim and the host of the AI Opportunity. Welcome back to the AI Opportunity. Super exciting. This week, I get to speak to Dr. Kim Nugent. So, Kim, super excited to see you. I think for the audience, really makes a lot of sense to me to tell them a little bit about you. So, Dr. Kim works in, I think, one of the most impactful areas of society. So, in prison reform, she's got what is 30 years of experience in working with not just challenging people, but really helping people when it comes to coaching on their life, taking their life in the right direction, importantly, being able to get to where they hope they can get to as a individual and more broadly as a long-term personal ambitions. And I think how that intersects with AI is going to be really, really exciting because all of us are going through that growth right now. And yeah, it would be really, really awesome, Dr. Kim, if you could tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and we'll jump straight in.
Sure. Well, I didn't start out doing prison reform. Let's start there. So I actually started out in the hospitality industry. And when I was in college, I knew specifically that one day I wanted to teach. But I wanted to teach something I knew something about. So I spent over 20 years in the hospitality industry. So when I think about that, what's my takeaway is really how I approach everything is really from servant leadership. And then I went into higher education, started at the bottom and worked my way up, ended up becoming a university president. But what I saw specifically at the university, working with the staff and the students I just adore, I see nothing but possibilities for them. And I also know that university is a place for people to make mistakes, because if they can't make mistakes there, they're not going to be the best version of themselves when they walk across the stage of graduation, which then led me into healthcare and then ultimately opening my own business and working in maximum security prisons. But it's the same situation. I see people as opportunities to be able to grow and learn. So it was a natural transition. It may not seem that way, but for me, it's been a natural transition.
No, it actually really is quite closely connected. I think maybe it seems disconnected, like you suggested, but ultimately we're all on a journey of improvement throughout life. And whether that's us as students or if we find ourselves taking the wrong turn in society. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I guess your passion is for helping people, which is amazing. I guess to jump in, obviously I talked a little about your work with prison reform. In particular, I mean, I think it's such an important part of society, how we tackle essentially reform. Why do you think so many people have a challenge when they leave prison? Obviously, you're in the US, I'm in the UK, but there are similar themes, I think, in many countries. What do you think the biggest challenges are?
It's so different around the world. Let's just say that when someone leaves prison. But what is the same, unfortunately, in most cases, in most countries, is the fact that they're not really equipped, or let me say it differently. They could be equipped to be successful when they leave. The community doesn't necessarily welcome them back with open arms. And so, I'll talk specifically, and it varies from state to state in the United States. I certainly know that it varies from country to country, and some are much more progressive than we are, honestly, to tell you the truth. But let's just play that out for a minute. Let's pretend for a moment. You said something so important a minute ago, which is, I always say, by the grace of God, I'm not in prison. I have never been. And wrong place, wrong time, wrong opportunity, wrong friends, wrong decision, all that changes. And I don't think people think about that so much. But going back to why it's so difficult is because, at least in the United States, when you leave, you could leave prison with with $25, $50, $100 max. So let's just play that out. Let's pretend for a moment it's you or someone in your audience. And so now you've been incarcerated for however long you have been. You have that little money. Where are you going to find transportation, email, cell phone, place to live, job? I could go on and on and on. That money is not going to go very far. And so that's one of the biggest issues, I think, keeping people. I always say that, the first 72 hours of leaving prison is really the most challenging because the opportunities are so little.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, it's shocking, actually. I mean, I think all of us, if we asked ourselves, what could you do with 25 bucks when you've not been in an environment for several years? I think that must be terrifying. Like, I know that's a strange word to describe.
Absolutely.
I think it must be absolutely terrifying. What do you do? Especially if you don't have family support and you're not necessarily, like you say, welcome back into the community. That's, I mean, probably on par with prison itself. Very scary, no?
Very
But
much
from
so
my
in such a
perspective, it
different way.
feels like,
Absolutely. And then, one thing, certainly the sentences in the United States are very long for many offenses. And so let's play that out. Let's multiply this challenge. You've been in prison 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And just think about technology and what's changed in just in the last 3.5 years that's been commercially available is AI, right? And so simple things like, let's say I've been in for a while. When I go to the grocery store, I don't know that I can self-check. When I go to get a gas station, I don't know that I have to pump my own gas anymore. And how do I do that? It used to not be that way. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And then you say they haven't had access to technology or the internet for all the right reasons. But then all of a sudden, now this world of AI that they really don't have a lot of knowledge about.
yeah, yeah. And that's a really interesting point because I think everyone can probably relate that if you've been away for such a long time and then you start to experience this revolution, this AI revolution, it's like landing on a new planet, right? In some respects, it's very, very alien. What do you think we can do to kind of prepare prisoners for this transition that's happening in the world? Because I would assume that would be the solution prior to leaving prison. There's some sort of equipping of the people in prison, or am I wrong, Kim?
You're not wrong at all. What I've been thinking a lot about is how could AI be used inside a prison today that would help support that transition. So obviously they're not going to have access to AI or the internet. However, the staff does. And we have people inside these prisons who are accountable for programming or a school principal or a deputy warden. So if we started there, one of the things that I think's where prisons fall short, and they have to just because of the masses. But I think that AI can actually expedite this in just one of the most wonderful ways possible. So let's think about the average prison has about 1,800 to 2,000 people inside. Now, every single one of those individuals is so different. Their background, their experience, their education, all of those pieces. And so when they are processed through the facility, they do an intake form, but it's a paper form to begin with. And the second thing though is that everybody is pretty much, as we know, one solution doesn't fit all. And so a lot of times prisons will have something for a GED program because a lot of the people do not have a GED or the equivalent of a high school diploma. However, that's not true of everybody. We have people who are college educated in prison. So what if, in terms of programming, what if the staff could use AI to be able to do the input, but then also say, based on our population today, what are the real programming needs over the next, say, 1, 2, or 3 years, where we could actually fund and support that so that when that's number one. Number two, when we have programming, what are the employers in our community, the 5 top industries specifically, how can we get them ready to be job ready when they leave? I mean, I can think of a variety of new ways to be able to use AI that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, that's really, really a significant point you make. So it's really about how AI can basically be leveraged for more personally focused rehabilitation, right? So
Yes.
people look at the individual, putting them at the center of their rehabilitation, rather than it being sort of like categories. So that and presumably, and I don't know the statistics, but is there a correlation with probably less reoffending as a result if you're essentially able to help that person have a better chance of being successful when they do go out into the outside world? I guess anecdotally, is that your experience that you've seen, or
Well, yes, but I'm gonna take it one step further. So
oh, sorry.
so,
Oh,
yes,
oh,
absolutely. When they participate in programming, it is going to reduce recidivism. The percentage I can't pull forward. I think that you have to track that individually. But I will say the programs that my program that I'm working with, we can prove out that the research says, which is true. The research actually says that prison mentorship programs, regardless of what the program is, if it's led internally by shared experience, meaning people who are incarcerated are actually helping support that programming all the way through, you can reduce recidivism up to 40%.
wow, wow. That's huge. The cost of that alone and the savings for society are worth it just off the face of it, right? It would seem 40% less people having to go into prison, 40% less homes and families being undermined in communities, 40% less taxpayer funds. I mean, is there a downside?
I certainly don't see that at all. I would also say not just peer-led mentorship, that statistic is solid. But I would also say there are a lot of really great volunteer organizations out there, I'll say spiritual in nature, that have amazing results. And I think that's another piece of it. So, like I said, it's not just one thing. If it were one thing, it'd be so easy and we'd solve this problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. On the mentorship point, and going back to the AI point, do you feel like there is a future where, because in the broader society, a lot of people are using AI almost as a sort of counselor in some respects, right? To help them think through some of the challenges they're having, almost like as an internal dialogue or support as a dialogue. Do you think that that's something that could be supportive for reoffenders? Because obviously, there's always limited resources, and 1,200 prisoners, if I get the number correct, having an individual mentor is probably quite impractical and challenging for kind of public services. But if you enable it with technology, is that a future that could really support them?
I think the real opportunity, since you mentioned that, I immediately went to where we're really shorthanded these days is behavioral therapists. Very limited staffing. The caseload is way too much, but using AI, for example, to be able to, even in a group setting with a therapist or something else, to be able to bring the AI aspect into it, I think could be really amazing. I mean, there's so many things that we could be doing right now, basically low cost, no cost in my world, to be able to provide that. And that's why I think it's such a win-win. So, at first, probably people inside prisons think, oh my gosh, technology. But no, you're actually going to leverage technology to be able to provide better services and at either low cost or no cost without adding really any additional staff. And so those are the kinds of solutions we need to be looking for.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's such a powerful insight because a lot of people, I think we all are amazed by this revolution, but mostly there's a lot of negativity at the moment in the air around, what AI could do to certain industries. But it's often not looked at in the positive light of like how it can help society. And this just feels like such a clear line of like being able to help genuinely people who need help, irrespective of, the reasons they're in prison. Like you say, they come out and they're trying to rebuild their lives. We should, as a society, do our very best to help them be successful. And like you say, something like AI that can help them with behavioral therapy or kind of maybe try and support their self-esteem and confidence. I'm not making any like political statements about like prison reform but broadly speaking, I imagine a lot of these people who are incarcerated, they do probably struggle with a lot of like personal confidence issues and psychological challenges because there's a reason why prison's meant to be a deterrent, right? It is a punishment. So I don't know. Is that correct, or am I?
No, I think you're 100% correct. I think shows like yours can really, maybe yours is the only show out there, but really raise the awareness level of people about how to think differently about how to use the technology. So let's think about this. I think about this all the time since I'm teaching people outside of prisons. And if you're not familiar with AI, it could be a little scary, even for someone who knows computers. So sometimes they're a little reluctant to do that. The second thing, though, is teaching people how to actually ask really great prompts to get the information that they need. And that takes practice. I've been using it. I'm a novice. I've only been using it 3.5 years. And I'm fascinated every day about even my thinking is changing about how can I be more specific in this prompt to get what I want the first time I ask it. But I'm also teaching AI about my background and my experience and those kinds of things. But I also think that since you brought this up related to people who are incarcerated, I believe that most of the people in prison today have gone through some kind of trauma in early childhood. And if they haven't, and there's some that haven't, if they haven't, then when they go to prison, I am guaranteeing that they have trauma just because the lighting, the noise, the safety, it's just so much. And just mentally, you have lost everything. When that gate slams, there is no other sound that gets in your mind like this is it. And so to be able to offer opportunities, but I even think, it'd be really cool, even if they didn't have access to technology and you had a teacher who knew something about it, would be so great to start teaching them reflection prompts now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I remember old days, I worked with this gentleman who taught at the university. He taught the computer classes and the computers hadn't come in on time. So he's teaching computer class without computers and he was so dadgum creative. And so he literally laid out a keyboard, a paper keyboard for everybody and just taught them. And by the time the computers came, they were able to make that transition. I'm thinking the same thing could happen, create some AI prompts on paper and then talk about it and figure out who has a better question or what can we learn from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point because the fact is that on the outside, in the wider world, this technology is accelerating faster and faster. And in some respects, teaching prisoners before they it seems like you joke about it. It seems like it would be almost sort of like something that's worthy of a laugh. But actually, by the time they come out, it probably is going to be quite dominant in society. This is AI more broadly, so it almost feels like it's necessary. I do want to suggest something though, because you said it at the start of the conversation about obviously they're not allowed internet access, and there are plenty of reasons why. But there probably is a way to serve models without providing internet access. You can do that locally if there are if it's like machines in these prisons. You'll probably have a model which is weighted and shaped so that it removes any of the things that might worry the correctional institutions, but still enables prisoners to be able to really learn the skills of this new technology. I think there's a path for that, Kim, just as an aside. So maybe we can talk about that separately if it's something you want some sort of thoughts on, because I think that's very achievable. But back to the broader conversation. So in terms of kind of future of like prison reform and AI, what do you think that sort of the powers that be need to understand that they're not understanding now, that actually for someone who is at the grassroots working with the people who are most affected and also at the intersection of AI, which you're probably the only person in the world, Kim, that has those two ticks to their name. What would you say if you had a platform to speak to the people that who make these decisions and are shaping policy?
So it's interesting that you mentioned that. I've been thinking a lot about that, and everything in my world starts with when I think about how do we come at something with a solution, it's getting people around a table and having a conversation. It starts with a conversation. I think the other thing is I just wrote, it's not on my website yet, but it will be a free downloadable guide for people to be able to figure out how can I help. And so I've actually written at the very back for staff to think about how they could actually use AI for programming inside a prison. So there's a place for everybody to participate for sure. And going back to what you said a minute ago, yes, there could be maybe some boundaries. We're not there yet today with AI and having people want to. I don't think the staff would be open to that at all. However, there are many prisons that offer tablets. And so even having a flat, it's only the class itself. There's not a lot of interaction, but there are quizzes that can be built in, even though it's not internet accessible. And so even having a test related to, you have this situation, which one of the followings would be the best prompt? What else could you be asking? I mean, I could think of a lot of ways statically that we could get there that would be safe for everybody, because I still know that it's still a prison and we still have to abide by the rules and safety is first.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. I mean, this has been really, 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 really fascinating. Guess so you talked about your website. Where can the listeners find your website? That's the first question. And I mean, you spoke a little to it, but yeah, what can we all do to support this? Because we're technologists. We love talking about how the world is changing and the good and the bad. We try and be as balanced as possible. Your topic and this conversation for me squarely sits in the good. So how can we help the good?
So it depends on, who you are. So for example, when I think about employers, so for example, considering being a second chance employer, take a chance on one. It could be someone in the neighborhood who maybe the father or mother isn't present and there's still children at home, volunteering, helping them, big brother, big sister, some opportunity like that. if you are of the religious nature and you attend a church or some type of religious institution, being more welcoming and having a get connected group for people, just coming back into the community. I think there's a place, I know there's a place for everyone, and it's just figuring out where that is. And if, for example, this topic isn't for you, then I think, find something that is you're really passionate about and volunteer there. We all need help. Even your neighbor, maybe there's an elderly neighbor who doesn't get out much and checking in on them. There's just a place for everybody. So really, wherever your heart is, follow your heart.
No, love it. It's such great wisdom. And this has really made my day, Dr. Kim. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. I hope you've enjoyed coming on the show too.
Absolutely. You always make me think.
Well, you've certainly made our audience think. And yeah, I think even though the topic has been AI and the intersection with just impact in society, I think has been really, really, really very rewarding. That's the end of the AI opportunity. Thank you so much for being on the show. And yeah, we're really grateful.
Great. And if anyone does want to reach me, it's www.drnugentspeaks.com, and it's DRNUGENT speaks.com.
Brilliant. I would second that. Please do reach out to Dr. Kim. And yeah, that's another episode of the AI opportunity.